need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk. Now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I'm an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, he just aged 9 months in a single day. It's Andy Greenwald!
You're just saying that because you're making me feel weird about this beard that's going on.
That's right. Andy and I are going to talk a little bit about WandaVision. We're going to talk a little bit about In and of Itself on Hulu, and we'll also talk a little bit about the Euphoria specials. I'm sure a ton of other stuff will come up because it's always a grab bag between these two old buddies. Let's get into The Watch!
This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day, or hiking, or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, you're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago. I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
What's up, man? How are you?
Just some pals hanging out on Zoom. I love it. Is that what we are?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where we've arrived. You know, we've got WandaVision to talk about, episode 3. We can do that in the second half of the episode if you want to, because I know just way more pressing matters at hand. Just two guys catching up. Greenwald, what was your favorite thing from the weekend?
Oh, boy, first of all, I want to say I didn't actually respond to this text that you sent me, but I want to just put this out there because I know people are interested in what we say, our opinions, things like that, what we cover, but they're also interested in us. I feel like that's fair to say. And what you guys need to know about Chris is he is as wonderful a friend offline as he appears to be on, because every week during the pandemic, every Friday, my guy checks in and he's always like, what's on tap for the weekend? And at this point, I feel like he's doing a bit. I feel like it's some sort of like Dada comedy.
It's not. I'm honestly hoping for inspiration from you. I'm hoping for ideas, like anything.
I will give you some children to take up your weekend. Like that's it. That's the weekend for me. So I would say, what were the highlights? I chose, so a good friend of mine, a friend of yours as well, is moving back east. And we decided we had a long simmering plan to go for a walk, which is something that you can mostly still do here, variants aside, so mask, take a walk. And we've been planning this and putting it off for about 2 months. And we finally settled on Saturday at 3 p.m., which was the exact time that Los Angeles, for the first time in 11 months, turned into a coastal English town.
I know. It looked like the moors out there. I know.
And it rained sideways. So that was a really weird choice. I realize this is a poor time of year to get pneumonia. So hopefully I've avoided that.
When that happened on Saturday, I just put on an entire outfit of LL Bean.
Did you really? Did you love it?
I will use any excuse to dress like I live in Minnesota. It doesn't matter. I will just start putting on every jacket I have as soon as it gets below 50 here.
Because I've lived here 4 years now, but I still just want what I moved here for, which is not that. And so I'm just out there experiencing the feeling of, do you remember? I think people who live here for a long time just forget things that were just a normal part of life.
This is what's driving me crazy about living here is just exactly what you're saying. I was online when it rained on Saturday, right? So on Sunday, I went to go get a coffee, and the woman in front of me, I could hear her because it was you wait until the person in front of you has cleared the cafe, and then you go in. And I could hear her being like, well, thank God the clouds are gone. I don't need that for another year. And I'm like, we're losing our minds out here. We're losing it. We need to get more seasonal variance in this place.
No, I am fine with that. I am very unhappy when it is anything less than 70 and sunny. And because like Saturday, I had soaked denim legs. Do you remember that feeling?
Yeah. Yes.
That is like 60% of
you
my
know what?
life in New York.
That made us, it built up stronger character than we have now.
My character is fine. I don't need that anymore. I don't need that kind of external strength because I believe in the light within. Shouts to our Quaker education. So walking in the rain on Saturday was a highlight. And then I was just saying to you and Kaya, on Sunday, I did a double feature of a 7-mile run and then a 3-mile hike. So basically, that is my life, where it is either all the same indoors or moving my legs outdoors. That's where I'm at.
Cool.
What about you? You must have had something. You have, to my mind, you have a dazzling life of options. And
yeah, I feel like I've started to get a little self-conscious about telling you what I'm up to because I know that you're just really doing everything you can to keep your kids engaged with planet Earth. And so if I tell you that I had a big old nap between the second and third quarters of the Chiefs-Bills game,
Jesus Christ.
or that
self-care.
I started watching a horror movie at like midnight on Saturday called Empty Man that was really good with James Badge Dale and Marin Ireland.
Those are two of your favorites.
Those are two CR Hall of Famers right there. Probably the most fun I had, not fun, but I had a lovely Friday night. I got a great takeout meal from a restaurant. Kaya just informed me I've been pronouncing it wrong, but a lovely restaurant downtown called Bavel.
Oh, it's not Bavel.
I thought it was Bavel. Kaya informed me otherwise. Bavel.
I feel like
I said Bavel.
I'm not entirely sure. I just think that Ty goes to the person closest to Israeli.
Yeah, that's you.
which I guess by default is me.
No, it's like Jewish power rankings of the watch. It's definitely AGCRKM.
I think everybody's okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you pronounce it?
I thought it was Bavel.
Okay. So Bavel, I got Bavel takeout.
It's a great place.
Had some lamb shawarma.
But Andy's the foodie here, so I would go with Andy's.
A temple to all these different like flavor components. You know what I mean? Like you got the acid going in there, got a little pickled cauliflower on top, hit it with all the sauces that they had. And because no one else in the house was eating a lot of lamb shawarma, I made like basically like the mega shawarma, you know, and just blacked out, had a couple beers, and then watched I watched both of them this weekend. These Euphoria specials, which I really wanted to ask you about. Now, I know that you are not a Euphoria watcher. I was a hard I was like, I like this show. I'm not going overboard about it. I think it has some flaws, but I found the cast incredibly charismatic, especially Zendaya and Hunter Schafer. It really grew on me as the season went on, that first season. So they were about to start the second season, pandemic hit. And as a kind of workaround, Sam Levinson, the person who writes and directs most of the episodes of Euphoria, decided to do these two specials, these two holiday specials. Holiday specials are a much more common occurrence for Brit TV, but he brought in Zendaya to do an episode and Hunter Schafer to do an episode. And the episode that Hunter's in, she also co-wrote with Sam Levinson. They are about an hour long each. The Zendaya episode features her character Rue talking with her NA sponsor, Ollie, played by Coleman Domingo.
One of my favorite actors.
And let me tell you something. This is one of the best things I've seen in a really long time. I talked about it a little bit on TV Concierge, but I was so deeply moved and shattered, possibly because I was like blood type shawarma at that point, and I was just blissed out. And this is not a very like uplifting episode of television, but it was a shattering one. And I thought the performances were great. I thought the writing was exceptional. It was like watching, I was saying like, it was kind of like watching a really great tennis match, watching these two players like play themselves into the game. And it's basically about addiction and about belief and faith. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful piece of acting and writing that I don't necessarily think you need to have watched Euphoria to have seen. So I hope that anybody who's listening to this who hasn't seen Euphoria and is like, well, I got to catch up on 10 hours of Euphoria before I can watch these. You don't. It'll spoil some stuff on Euphoria for sure. But if you just want to see someone trying something out, both on a performance level and on a writing level and on a directing level, and answering the kind of like really tough situation where how do we make television during this time period? I hope more shows do shit like this. The thing that I was coming away from this with was like, I wish there was a Succession special that kind of was just Kendall and Shiv eating Chinese food and watching the news for an hour or something. Like, I would take a lot of little left turns and like experiments that we're not really getting now. So kudos to Levinson for doing that. And I also really liked the Jules episode, which aired last night, and that I thought was, it filled in a lot of stuff on the Jules character that explains some of the things that happened in the first season in a really artful way, and does a lot of stuff that you could tell they were just experimenting. Like they like basically the opening 3 minutes is just like a Lorde song playing while Jules's character arc from the first season is being reflected in Jules's eyes while a Lorde song plays. Like just trying shit out.
Which Lorde song? I just want to gauge my own.
Liability.
That good song.
Anyway, I just wanted to shout those out because I thought they were really excellent, and it made me very excited for season 2 of Euphoria, which we may not get in 2021. So just wanted to highlight that.
I love that. Well, two things. One, I take no pride in my Euphoria ignorance. That was, for people who weren't listening back then, that show premiered when I was in production in Albuquerque. And I was like, I can't do this. I just don't have the headspace. I couldn't make it through an hour-long show of any kind during that time. Just didn't have the headspace for it. So that was my fault, not the fault of the show. But it deserves attention. I should check it out. But I really love what you're saying. Partly because selfishly, I really just wanted to watch an hour of Zendaya and Coleman Domingo because I think they're both exceptional.
Yeah.
So I will check it out. But two, I think you're making a really good point, not just about a better way forward for all media, if it could just be a little more nimble. I mean, we are seeing established institutionalist things like, the theatrical window just start to fall like dominoes. There is no reason why other, even, less entrenched ideas about how production should work should fall, why they can't fall also. In my mind, the only sudden pivot to current events that sticks out in my mind is that, absolutely awful episode of West Wing that happened right after 9/11.
Right.
And maybe that's a cautionary tale, or maybe that's why other shows don't do it. But
wasn't that like a season premiere that they had rewritten to reflect 9/11 or something like that?
I think what they did was they had a season premiere locked and loaded, and then 9/11 happened and they delayed the season and they did a live or almost live
like
type
Stockard
episode.
Channing and Martin Sheen are like in a locked in a room with a bunch of like school kids because they're on lockdown, right?
Yes, something like that. And especially, you got to think that the fact that Sam Levinson is relatively young and is a filmmaker himself, and that Zendaya is both young and a sensation, like that moves things along more quickly. But this fear, I think, is sort of baked in of like, messing with the canon, messing with the official season, like, and all of those things have started to crumble. And I think that's probably a good thing. I would much rather have, a nimble, honest change of schedule or change of style or change of delivery method that's in response to what's possible in the moment, as opposed to, and it'll be interesting to see this as these long delayed seasons start to finally both get into production, into post, and onto our screens. I would much rather the former than something that feels tight, there's no reason to beat up on The Great. I'm sure The Great second season will be very successful, but I keep thinking about just like the hoops that are necessary to jump through to make a COVID-friendly, COVID-safe, nobody wants to be COVID-friendly, a COVID-safe model for the second season on a show that demanded, or at least set the precedent, of dozens of Randy extras in every frame.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? I don't mean to hold that show up, but I just feel like there might be a kind of a tightness.
Euphoria was also another show that I think was not going to be very COVID safe. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot
of Randy extras there too.
There's a few Randy extras. I think there's actually a guy named Randy Extra who shows up in a couple of parties. I was going to say that, did you happen to see the interview that our buddy Sam Esmail did about the kind of early stages of planning Battlestar? It came out, I aggregated a bunch, but it came out a week or two ago. I was going to mention this to you because he sort of, more than talking about what this this iteration of Battlestar Galactica will be about, because I think they're still in the whiteboarding process. He was like, my big hope is that if we have a battle, a huge battle that takes place over 3 episodes, we can put those 3 episodes up at once. And then if we want to do a 25-minute character study of somebody's backstory, we can just put up a 25-minute episode, and that we can really start playing with the release schedule and the bundling of this story and messing around with that. And that was the thing that I really got out of Euphoria is as soon as the Roos episode started, I realized I didn't really care that much about like where we left off with Euphoria, even though we left off in a very, tenuous, precarious place for a bunch of the characters. It was just that I missed them. And I kind of wanted to see what was up with them and what I wanted to hear them talk again and hear them think through stuff. And that often is kind of sacrificed at the altar of what you're talking about, this sort of intricate world building and continuity shaping and saving things for spinoffs and saving things for season 4 or the final season. And it was refreshing to kind of see somebody just be like, I love watching this person just kind of work their way through their shit.
Yeah. And I should say, I am very sympathetic to someone like Jesse Armstrong, the creator of and showrunner of Succession. Not that we're creating a false choice. I don't think anyone was like, hey, Jesse, you got some stray bits. You want to do a live episode? I don't think that happened.
Right.
But you get the sense, I've been thinking a lot about the second season because I missed the show, of just how well crafted it was, how absolutely clockwork it was and how it delivered, all of the twists and turns up to that ultimate payoff at the end of the season. So I'm very sympathetic to a creator being like, look, I have very special plans here. I don't get that many bites at the apple, so I'm not just going to mess that up. We're going to deliver. People will appreciate it if we deliver what we intend to deliver. That said, I think it does take, I don't want to body shame Sam, but 800-pound gorillas like Sam to actually change things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I saw this firsthand with him as an executive producer. Like, he gets stuff done. He opens doors. He throws that crucial block downfield that lets you get away with stuff. And it does take industry leaders, or at least loudest voices in the room, to shake things up to the degree that you're talking about. And that's I think what he's saying with Battlestar is really exciting and is very much the natural next iteration for what we're starting to see with sort of savvy, bespoke release schedules. We talk about how The Boys, how Amazon found a sweet spot. 8 episodes total, 3 dumped at once, and then week to week. But moving forward, I would hope that Disney would be paying attention to this too, and we can pick this thread up again when we talk about WandaVision in the second half of the show, because I think it probably would have benefited from a little bit more
creativity in this regard.
Creativity in the delivery.
Yeah. We'll get to WandaVision in a second, but speaking of shaking up traditional releases, let's talk a little bit about In and of Itself. This was a show that I actually saw in LA, I think in 2017 or 18, at the Geffen Playhouse. When this was coming out on Hulu, I was kind of like, well, I saw it. I don't know if I'm going to really check it out. I have to admit, I really just scanned it, but it was getting a lot of like really big plaudits. The funny thing about it is that I don't feel like anyone is comfortable telling anybody what happens in this production, which is essentially Frank Oz filmed Derek Delgadio's one-man show called In and of Itself, which he had been doing in New York for several years, and then moved it to LA. And, this isn't like, oh, you have to see Hamilton. This is actually literally like, once you explain the kind of things that happen in it, I think it starts to chip away at somebody's enjoyment of it. If you go into it cold, I think it's a much more magical experience. Forgive the turn of phrase there, but it's a much more magical experience to go in cold. Although I don't know if that was the case for you.
Yeah, I'm of a couple different minds about this. I had never heard of this. And by the way, I would like to sidebar and say, when there is not a viral pandemic, I continue to think that you lead a thrilling life, because you have this robust, busy side schedule of theatrical events, one-man shows, Magic Castle visits. I know you're a big fan of close-up magic.
I've been like
and stuff.
3 times. Yeah, it's like I mostly go for the prime rib.
But you're out there, man. You know what I mean? You're in the streets.
So let's just get cards on the table. Are you into do you think magic's cool?
we've had this conversation on the pod before.
Have
and
we really?
I still, because one time you just sort of passingly referenced that you'd gone to the Magic Castle. I think I was still in New York and I was just flabbergasted.
Okay.
So it's relevant here because Derek DeGlaudio is a sleight of hand illusionist, a magician. It's not necessarily the full scope. It's not the raison d'etre, to quote Call My Agent, probably, of the show, but it is a piece of it, right? And so I do think that you have to be interested in perform magic, which you are.
Sure. I am.
Why?
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like, I don't know, like it's the same reason why I'm into like Patrick Mahomes, like shovel passing to dudes, like while 800 pounds of lineman is chasing down on him. Like I like seeing people do sleight of hand. I like seeing people come up with creative executions for things like that, I guess. There's not necessarily like a deep fascination. It's not about like having a deep fascination with like there being some sort of magic in the world. It's more about watching skill and performance, I think.
Well, which I appreciate. And I think I kind of like that too. But I also think that, again, without giving too much away, I think that there's something kind of existential about his illusions, and about this piece in general. It's kind of trying to poke at the very nature of what is magic and what are we compelled to believe and what we want to believe, which is rich terrain. I also very much walked away with I didn't walk far because I watched it on my couch, but I turned it off kind of thinking, and again, we're not going to spoil it. I think people should watch it, and I think we both would love to hear people's reactions to it. Thinking that what I saw was kind of it was, and this is an image that's in the show itself, kind of like a ship in a bottle, in that there was something vibrant, pulsing, messy, emotional, and alive that clearly happens in his live shows in that room, in that very small black box theater.
There's a lot of audience participation, and not in the not in the hold this rabbit kind of way. It's very emotional. And
there was something about and I guess this is my question, and maybe we can't really answer it, but maybe this is something people can let us know about. There was something about it that left me feeling removed and cold because I wasn't there. And I don't know whether that's just the nature of this sort of show filmed, which it might be partly. Is it to do with Frank Oz's direction? And let me just say, big fan of Frank Oz's direction. Muppets Take Manhattan, one of my all-time favorite films. But he does something in this, and again, I don't think this is a spoiler, that when the show reaches certain inflection points, he shows that same point happening over a number of different shows, because clearly he filmed a number of different performances. That has, to me, it had kind of a deadening effect because it made it feel like a trick, not like an intimate moment that I was sharing with these people who I wasn't in the room with. So anyway, I thought it was fascinating. I think the reaction to it and its popularity prior to being filmed on Hulu is really noteworthy about what people want out of entertainment, what they're looking for. But I'll also say that I think that it might be helpful for people to go into it not with nothing in their minds, because basically I had never even heard of this.
Yeah, right. Did you just read some review of it, or did you see people talking?
Not even. I just saw some tweets. People were like, the highest praise I can give to this absolute miracle of a thing is I knew nothing about it. You must go in cold. And I was like, okay, Busy Phillips or whatever. You've never steered me wrong before, which is true. Not to get too inside LA restaurants, but the time I saw Busy Phillips at Squirrel, she recommended a special to get, and boy, was she right. And it wasn't. Was
she just standing at the door telling people to get certain like jams or what?
No, she was dining there. She's a big fan.
Still a big fan?
And well, I haven't been able to follow up with her. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but do listeners of The Watch know that my relationship with Busy Phillips exists solely because I met her mother once?
You have a relationship with Busy Phillips?
I don't. We say hello to each other now.
Okay.
And, well, not now because no one goes anywhere, but she's out and about in Los Angeles.
Busy Phillips is on a hiking trail that you're on. Do you guys acknowledge each other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 100% yes. Because one time my family was on vacation and I was with, I had a baby at the time. And so there was someone where we were staying, it was like driving a golf cart, and the guy works at the hotel.
This is like a resort. Okay.
Yeah. And was like, would you like a ride since you're going over there? You have a baby. And I was like, thank you. This is my baby, in case you were wondering. I always felt a little imposter syndrome-y. as a new dad holding a baby. And there was a woman already on the golf cart, and we started chatting, and she wanted to know all about, she was very interested in my daughter, and I have granddaughters and blah, 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 and live in Los Angeles. And then she referenced her granddaughter. This is why you should never say your children's names on Twitter. But Busy Phillips is really on Front Street with her children's unique names.
Everybody knows. Yeah.
And I was like, you're speaking warmly of your granddaughter Cricket. I have to ask, I assume your daughter is beloved comedy actress Busy Phillips.
Oh, so you broke the fourth wall and said that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And
she was like, oh, do you know her? And I was like, I mean, who among us?
So then you met Busy?
Yes. And told her, and she loved this because this is apparently very on brand for her mother, who acts as a de facto publicist for her. Regardless, the least I could do after her mother was so nice to me was take her advice and watch the magic show she recommended on Hulu. Full circle, baby. Just to say, I am curious. I think hopefully people are still listening to this, and it's Bavel. And I think that it's worth going into this not expecting the second coming, because then you'll be like potentially underwhelmed. But
the
be like,
headline
this is a really
for this
interesting,
episode is going to be
thing.
amazing. Cricket Phillips, Bavel, and more. Yeah,
and shawarma fever,
and Kaya McMullen's distinct lack of Judaism.
Yes, which has been a recurring theme for the last year and a half, but only for the people who are paying close attention. Last point. I know you referenced Hamilton.
Uh-huh.
And earlier, for people who are listening, who are still listening, we were talking about the collapsing theatrical window or whatever.
Yeah, but I meant that literally, like the idea of like the theaters closing and now those things are coming to streaming services. Yeah.
That's all I'm saying too. Like, I would love it if more stuff just got filmed. I know what the Constitution means to me is up there on one of the services. I think is it Amazon?
Yes,
I think we're trending towards this happening more and more. But I think
I'm so glad you're mentioning this. I have something I'd like to say about this.
Oh,
I would love for more theatrical productions to get a year after its hit stages, like it can go on a streaming service. But
okay,
I humbly request that they all look like dog shit. They in no way should improve upon the experience of seeing them in a theater.
Right.
They should essentially be like C-SPAN, where it's like, here is Jake Gyllenhaal and Seawall. If you really want the experience, you need to go see it. You should have seen it. I know it's expensive. I know that is a very privileged act, is to be able to afford Broadway tickets. But let's just say there is one version of this thing where you get to go see this thing, and you save up money and you go see a play on Broadway or a play off Broadway. The other version is we all get to see it. We all get to appreciate the beauty of Sam Shepard's words, but just a camera in the back of the theater, a camera on the left and a camera on the right. That's all I want. None of this, no Spike Lee American Utopia stuff.
I think that's great. I also think that that's very outdated thinking, this idea that somehow you're going to confuse the marketplace if there's a film of the show and then at some point later someone makes a movie. You know what I mean? Like, the world will be okay. Like,
yeah,
that's
think
fine.
about how many people would have been robbed of that moment where they realized that they were seeing Hamilton with like Greg Popovich and Sting, like when they
you mean the movie version starring Greg Popovich and Sting?
No, when they, because there was a thing there for a while in New York where like you would go into Hamilton.
Oh,
yeah. You were lucky enough to get into Hamilton. You'd look around and you'd be like, holy shit, Sting's here.
God, I forget who was there. I feel like I may have said it on the podcast that there was someone totally random when I saw it, but I don't remember. But yes, that's the other. If you watch in and of itself and you're on the fence, first of all, it's 90 minutes. The fence isn't that uncomfortable. Stay on it. But two, it's worth watching to the end, because at the end there is even more audience participation than you may have realized.
Yes.
And it's pretty funny who's there, I would say.
I did not expect Hilaria Baldwin to be there.
I did not expect her to speak Castilian Spanish so beautifully.
She nailed it.
But she nailed it. Yeah. So that was it was a really interesting, surprising watch that I don't think had the emotional effect on me that it did on my longtime friend and collaborator, Busy Phillips. But I
really like it. I would highly recommend it. If people are looking for some stuff to watch, I think they could do a lot worse than 2 episodes of Euphoria, and in and of itself on Hulu.
Before we get into WandaVision,
yeah, for sure.
There was one other big.
This is the work it all out episode.
Oh,
have you noticed that Kaya hasn't chimed in since we brought up her Judaism?
It's because she's doing Torah study in the background. We shamed her.
This episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. New Year's resolutions are fun the first couple of weeks. Then you kind of maybe conveniently forget about them halfway through January. No shame. It happens to us all. But this year I have a foolproof plan, at least when it comes to saving money. Just switch to Mint Mobile and you're done. Goal accomplished, because for a limited time, their wireless plans are $15 a month when you buy a 3-month plan. The great thing about Mint Mobile is there's no jaw-dropping monthly bills or unexpected overages, and all plans come with unlimited talk and text. Get this new customer offer today at mintmobile.com/watch. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
You got very excited about a pop culture drop this weekend, and I need you to defend your enthusiasm.
The Kong trailer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to talk about this.
Yeah. What a bunch of Technicolor bullshit, man. That looks insane.
Yo.
I think that there's been a few of these movies. 2 of them were Godzilla movies where I've gotten very excited over the trailer and imagined a version of myself that either sincerely or ironically enjoys it, and goes and just has like a fucking extra large popcorn, is throwing goobers at the screen and just hooting and hollering for Mothra and all these things. I have to say, this movie looks absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's right at the Mendoza line where it could dip into unwatchable. But talk to me in March when we're still inside.
I respect that. I gotta say, this version of you hooting and hollering and eating goobers, this is like Ted Cruz wearing a polar fleece. You know what I mean? Like, I don't buy this version of you. I don't buy this common man.
That's what I'm saying, is that I think I imagine a version of myself that does that.
Right.
But then I actually think that like I have some internal like receptors that go off. Like I was telling Fantasy about this earlier where I was just like, the funniest thing about these movies is how they all start, like when they start these franchises, they all start in the most like sincere, like this is going to be about nuclear war. And then like after the 3rd or 4th one, they're like, it's Fast and the Furious, man.
Well, so I watched this and it made me wonder whether we deserve the vaccines. I'm going to be honest with you. I just feel like this is what we're rushing back for. We're good. Maybe we should just like sit a couple more plays out and really think about what we want to contribute.
We're getting the vaccine
to the
so that Martin Scorsese can make a $250 million version of Killers of the Flower Moon.
No,
that's what we're
making
hoping.
it. No, I'm trying to think. If Fran Lebowitz is the Kong in Martin Scorsese's $300 million movie, I don't know who is just Taurus, the Godzilla that she's filming her battle. I was so flabbergasted by this. It looks so
your girl Rebecca Hall
so heroically, hysterically stupid, and just so much time, energy, talent, and money thrown at it that I was really.
I really like Adam Wingard, the guy who directed it. I really like.
So I just need to understand. And so I looked this up, and I was like, didn't we just do all this? Like, what are we doing now? Because first of all, isn't this Rampage, the video game from our childhood that was a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson film a few years ago? But I guess that had a giant wolf.
Did the gorilla in Rampage fight a lizard? Like a
dude,
Godzilla? Oh, I didn't know.
And
that.
A wolf.
Okay, how big is the wolf? How big is the gorilla?
Listen, you're the one that goes to movies. You should have come prepared.
I never played Rampage. Obviously, big Donkey Kong guy. I don't really remember playing Rampage that much.
Rampage is pretty fun. You just climbed things and punched. Regardless, I didn't realize that that's
not what video games are like now, by the way. I hope you know that. If you ever get back into video games, like once your last kid goes to college and you buy Red Dead Redemption, know that you need to you have to understand your horse's psychology when you're playing these games now.
That would be great for me because we've talked about the one time I tried to play Grand Theft Auto and I was like, well, I'm going a little fast in the school zone. Like I'm terrible.
You were trying to cancel people on Grand Theft Auto.
How dare you, sir? Yeah. I didn't realize that this movie which seems fully
King Kong versus
birthed
Godzilla,
from the Bullshit Factory,
yes,
is actually the sequel to Kong Skull Island. Like, this is in continuity. So
there's Godzilla. There was Godzilla King of the Monsters, I think. Well, there was another one that came out with Vera Farmiga.
But there have been so many. I didn't know that
and
they
then
were
Kong
actually
Skull
like,
Island was the fake Vietnam movie. Yeah.
But they're hewing to canon here, right? Like this is, oh my God. I don't know. And I retract it. I think society, you know what? Here's my hot take. I think we should all get vaccinated and be better and like have our lives back on the earth. I think that's fine. Okay. That is my blanket opinion. I'll say it to anyone, including Busy Phillips' mother, who's a lovely lady. But the fact that I watched this and I was remembering a couple weeks ago when Christopher Nolan people were like, Warner Brothers has proved that it is no friend to the creative soul by putting these films on their streaming services. And I'm like, you were serious about that? Like, you were fighting for the right for this to be in a movie theater? Warner Brothers just gamed all of us because those dudes were looking at what they had in their own personal Hurt Locker, and it was Wonder Woman 1984 and this nonsense. And they were like, let's just really challenge the orthodox. Let's be disruptors.
Yeah. They're doing a 4-hour Snyder Cut.
They don't want to put this in the theater. They want to quietly back away, right?
This is the first movie of this batch of HBO Max things that have been coming out where I'm like, I don't know that the special effects are really going to translate to people's televisions.
Yeah, that's the least of their worries. Here's my follow-up question, because you're steeped in giant monster lore. And I know this is a spoiler. I mean, people are going to be shocked about this. The idea of watching giant creatures rampage has
what's
never.
What's up with the image that you're painting of me in this episode of The Watch?
You painted it.
Where I'm just like
I'm just a common guy,
a magic
hollering,
a guy who loves magic,
stuck in your teeth.
Yeah,
you're a mark, is what I'm saying. Okay, it's pretty clear. Pretty clear. My question is, and I'm asking this to you as just, you know what I mean? Just like a guy sitting across from you in a Zoom room who cares a lot about election security. You know what I mean? Like that's you're just asking the questions. You just want everybody, to make sure they're
heard. Yes.
Right. So can you tell me why Kyle Chandler, one of our great actors, says in the trailer, meaning that they had a whole movie to cull lines from and they chose this one, says, why is Godzilla trying to hurt people?
This is the $1 million question. And the reason why I'm not a millionaire is because I could just watch the previous film and I assume that they come to some sort of détente with Godzilla, that they have a power sharing agreement.
What?
Well, obviously they need to bring...
So Godzilla agree
yeah.
in exchange for not filibustering New York, Godzilla agrees to let Kong have the gavels? What is this power sharing agreement?
And then I think what happens is Godzilla breaks the truce and they have to bring Kong in to defend humanity. Because Kong has a special relation, like a psychic bond with this child who's able to communicate with him.
Here's what I'd like. And I mean this, I mean this sincerely. Like, there's this clip that went viral that charmed everyone where these young men who are hearing a Phil Collins song for the first time, right? And they're like, this is incredible.
Oh, and then they do the drum solo, yeah.
They do the drum solo and they're like experiencing culture that for us is like, just that was our childhood. We know that stuff. I would like a similar kind of test done for young people, active, once things are back to normal, active, like movie-going, culture-engaging people, ages 15 to 25, and just run some IP by them. Like, do they have any actual knowledge of, affection for, or allegiance to fucking Godzilla in 2021? Do they actually care at all? You know what I mean? Like, similarly, we could do it. I think the answer to this would be no, to other stuff that keeps getting run back, like Lost in Space is on Netflix. Do you think people are like, oh, great, terrific. I heard my great-grandfather talk about this radio serial. You know what I mean? I have this vision. Maybe this is the utopian in me. Or maybe this is the fact that my only entertainment involves walking outside of my house. I don't know, every so often. But can't we use this as can we just reconsider? Can we sweep this stuff onto the streaming services and just reconsider? I'm not saying we can't have our big franchise entertainment.
Sure.
But really, what are we doing?
But do we need to spend $1.5 billion on Godzilla movies?
Why are we still doing it? Like, was the return on the Skull Island investment that strong?
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it's not because they did it because they felt like they had a lot more story to tell, or because it was like artistically rewarding.
Maybe they did.
Let's talk a little bit about Wanda before we get out of here. I mean, let's talk a lot about Wanda. Although I don't know if we have a lot to talk about, because this was another handoff to Joe Morris, 3 yards in a cloud of dust episode, I thought. Obviously, at the end of it is the first really significant cracks in the veneer of what this world is. And we get a little Truman Show-esque pullback where we can see that Westview is actually like under some sort of government surveillance, and that Tiana Paris's character gets ejected from it and like winds up in a field at the end. There's also a pretty cool moment where Catherine Hahn's character obviously becomes very suspicious of Geraldine, the Tiana Paris character, being inside Vision and Wanda's house when Wanda gives birth to her twins. I don't know. Did you have any big notes from this episode? I think I saw a bunch of people being like, they need to wrap this part of the show up and start dropping some plot points pretty soon. But I guess I'm happy enough to go along at the pace that it's going along. I think that my bigger note would have been like, it would have been fine if they had put these 3 episodes up at once and let people sort of enjoy them in a block.
Yeah, I think that this one, I mean, first of all, I really enjoy the show. I enjoy the world. I really like the performances. And I find it really entertaining, compelling, and not at all unsettling, but kind of, intriguing in the right ways. I think this episode does not work as this week's episode. I think it would have been better served being as a block with the first 2, or potentially maybe as a block with the next 1 or 2. Primarily because the show is pivoting pretty quickly out of the conceit. And, I don't think there's any need for backseat driving or like Monday morning quarterbacking it. Like this was, even if it wasn't meant to be the first Marvel TV show, it was going to be in the first wave, it was going to be the second one.
Yeah.
They simply couldn't just make it Pleasantville for 9 episodes. That was never going to be the case. From jump, they had to give you a little taste of the larger MCU to keep that casual fan engaged. So I get that. The speed that it's happening is, I really was enjoying what they were doing. So I guess I'm a little disappointed in that. I also felt in this episode for the first time, and maybe there's a meta commentary here, because in this episode, Wanda's pregnancy, it's 9 months in an afternoon, basically. But it really felt sped up and accelerated. And it, not only that, it felt like they were in a hurry now to shake this conceit, because the crafting of the bits and the jokes, I mean, the first episode were pitch perfect. Second episode was funny because it was just a big comedic showpiece in the middle of it. This one was sort of racing to get to the end, I felt, and it didn't really have much.
Well, quite literally, they were running, like Vision's running around. Yeah, right.
Other than the opening credits, which were once again just amazing, and I was like, they must have had so much fun making it, and I love that they put resources behind that. There wasn't really much else that like hewed to the historical record in terms of what 70s shows were like. You know what I mean? After the first 4.5 minutes, if that. So that was kind of a bummer. I think the other thing that it's reminding me, and this is where the MCU might struggle as it moves to television, which is generally a medium, certainly we do this. People look for more meaning from the story than they are looking for, the kind of adrenaline highs from the action. And we've said this in different forms as we've post-mortem some of the MCU stuff, or talked about what it might be like on TV, but this was the first time I kind of saw it in practice. It could be that this is true for comic book stories too, but superhero movies are never about anything other than superhero movies, right? Like they're not about 70s Cold War paranoia. They're not about the deep state. They're not about, freedom of expression. They're not. They're just stories about themselves and the entertainment we can derive from them. And sometimes, and this is certainly true in comics, they're also about watching creators cook with the wildest, craziest ideas, images, thoughts, storytelling styles that we've seen. And sometimes that, shouts to Derek, in and of itself is worthwhile. Ultimately, this isn't going to be a show I don't think, I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think it's going to be a show about a woman who's basically been held captive, tortured in a variety of ways for her entire life, which is the Wanda Maximoff story, right? And potentially still true if she is, as is often the case in comics, being held here for her own safety or for other people's safety because her powers are so wildly out of control.
Right.
It's going to be a story about a robot and a superhero who figure something out and escape. And spaced out over 10 episodes, that starts to feel a little bit emptier, I think, than the alternative. And I'm worried that going forward, this idea of going to TV and being like, oh, maybe there's room for these types of stories in Marvel stories, maybe that's not going to be the case.
I think that's a little bit specific to these characters and the way in which they're telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a little bit of an unfair comparison because this is the first Disney Plus superhero story to follow up after Mandalorian. Not superhero, but big franchise storytelling experiment to follow up Mandalorian. And Mandalorian actually, for as much as at the end of the second season became about connecting it to a larger Star Wars universe, so much so that a Skywalker shows up in Mandalorian, a lot of those episodes of the first 2 seasons really are Mando goes to a planet, is given a task, accomplishes this task, sometimes with the help of Baby Yoda, sometimes with some other friends, gets some crucial piece of information and keeps it moving. But there is a set piece. There is a piece of action. There is a piece of like, we learn about Mandalorian's specific set of skills when applied to stopping this big worm from crushing all these traitors or whatever. So far in WandaVision, and I think this is my issue maybe with these two characters, even in those MCU movies, is like, I don't really get, like, it just seems like these characters can do anything and are so like just completely Deus Ex Machina powered that I don't really know what the stakes or consequences are. And I actually think it would have been pretty funny and pretty amusing to watch Wanda actually have to cook a meal for her boss's for her husband's boss, rather than like magically put something together and then all of that. And that whole that whole episode is essentially building up to the moment where Wanda breaks character and gets Vision to dislodge the food from Fred Melman's throat. I think that there needs to be, it either needs to go one direction or another. It either needs to fully kind of like invest in the fact that these people are quote unquote trapped in a sitcom, but then actually do the sitcom well.
Yes.
Or,
which they did for one episode. I thought.
Or get out of this sitcom and make it so that like we're spending more time with Tiana Paris and Catherine Hahn and whoever else is in the show who are kind of monitoring what they're doing, and we get into why they are stuck there. Because I think it's a little bit in between right now, and it maybe is. It's not by any means boring. I mean, they're putting so much into so many different elements of the recreations of these decades of sitcoms that I'm not pissing on it. I'm just sort of saying, like, as a thing that you look forward to and then fire up on Friday, I think it can feel a little bit light and empty.
I think I think that one of the things that it's hinting at being interested in is a recurring story that comes up a lot, especially in the last 20 years, about the character of Scarlet Witch, which is she's just way too powerful. It's just dangerous. That's an interesting idea for a superhero story. It's been done, to varying degrees in many comics and not just in the Marvel Universe. It doesn't necessarily square with the Marvel Universe that we've seen in movies where, by and large, heroism is a good thing.
Yeah.
And all these people put their powers to
not
just good use, but collegial use.
The whole Civil War thing was about degrees of heroism. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be very interesting if they are tiptoeing down this road, partly because they haven't done something like this, and TV would be a better, more effective place for it, that she's just sort of there, quote unquote, for her own good. And this is maybe her own vision of normalcy that she was denied, and why not let her have it? What's the harm? Et cetera,
and I saw
that
it was like people said like, oh, this is the reality that she understands by watching TV from Sokovia, like watching reruns from classic TV, American TV.
Sokovia had a very liberal syndication market, I guess. That's not so terrible, but it also, is often the case with the least successful comic book movies or stories. They generally come from characters or situations that are inherited, that you don't need to do, but you do because the fans expect it. And to that end, like Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch were among the first people to join the Avengers after the original Avengers. And so they were logical for Joss Whedon to bring into the story and then obviously concoct a whole fictional nation and, lift it into the sky and drop it down and all the stuff that he did in the Ultron movie. But there's no real reason why we need the Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Universe. You know what I mean? Like Elizabeth Olsen's great, but like those powers that are so ill-defined in the Avengers movies, there wasn't like a random happenstance plot hole that needed to be filled with a woman who can provide random happenstance by wiggling her fingers. So all I'm saying is I hope that, and I feel like they generally do approach these things with this kind of creative spirit, like since they are down this road, then maybe they might actually start to poke at some of the things that have made her more compelling and kind of almost villainous at times in the comic books as it's developed.
That would be cool.
And the twins thing is a whole other. People should Google some of this because it's just bananas. It's bizarre because she did have twins with a robot lover who I guess at some point were retconned away into being just figments of her imagination that she created with the help of the devil, but then also became superheroes in their own right in my friend Alan Heinberg's Young Avengers comic book. So very curious.
Have you done much like reading at all about the sort of signs or signals that we're getting about what the larger story of WandaVision is? Like, or are you just kind of taking it week by week?
I'm taking it week by week, but also the piecemeal knowledge of some stories that I had read in comics. And like the Sword, there is a group that's either works as part of S.H.I.E.L.D. or not part of S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, it's gone through a number of iterations, but there is a governmental type group called Sword in the comics that I guess we're dealing with now. And Tiana Paris was announced as playing Monica Rambeau, as the daughter of the character that appeared in the Captain Marvel movie and was herself known as Captain Marvel in the Marvel Universe before now settling on, I think she's called Spectrum.
Okay.
So she's a superhero.
That's who I get my internet and cable from. So shout out to her.
She's doing great for you, right? Like better than when she was in New York. Is that fair to say?
Right. We can wrap it up there. It was great to talk to you. I think we learned a lot about each other today.
Maybe too much. Is that possible?
That's up to the listeners to decide. We'll see if they're back on Thursday.
Yeah, we'll see. And if they are, that's the kind of magic that I can get behind.
See you later.
Great job, Bransky.